I'm joined by the author of a forthcoming biography of one Lincoln Riley, Brandon Sneed. The biography is called Sooner, The Making of a Football Coach, Lincoln Riley's Rise from West Texas to the University of Oklahoma. Be sure to get your copy wherever books are sold. It was a light and quick read for me, but I think that says something about me as much as it does anything else. Brandon, how you doing, man?
Doing great, RJ, man. Appreciate you having me on. So excited to talk about the book and everything. And yeah, doing great.
How's it feel to have it out in the world? Because, like, that's where I was.
Yeah, no, it feels good. I mean, it's surreal. It's been a trip getting it here. Yeah, I think people are just gonna have a really great time reading it. That's kind of my goal with it. I mean, like you said, it's a quick, light read, and that was, I mean, really what became the goal as I was working on it. I just wanted it to be something that, yeah, like covered Lincoln's, life up to this point, but really, I mean, what drew me to it was it's a great story that I think will just really entertain people for a minute, take their minds off of everything going on, and yeah, I just think it's something that'll be a good time for people.
Well, that was going to be my first question. Like, why did you want to write this book in particular? Like, we, I think we're colleagues at SB Nation Longform because I remember reading you way more than I was
Oh
published there.
man, yeah,
Okay.
throwing it all the way back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
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 man. And, like some of those projects turn into book projects. And it sounds like
right.
with this Bleacher Report story that you'd written about Lincoln back in 2017, that's what happened.
Yeah, pretty much. Even as I was working on it, as I was finishing that story, I mean, I thought there could be a book there and talked to my agent about it at the time, mentioned it to Lincoln at the time, and he was, pretty on the fence about it. And I mean, it was something that's been on my mind. And then towards the end of last year, or I guess the end of 2018, I was just kind of figuring out, next steps. I mean, writing books is kind of, what I really want to do with my career and my life. And was talking to my agent about it. He said he thought that we should go for it, and worked up a proposal. And thankfully, it sold pretty quickly, and just kind of rolled from there. But like I said, I just loved his story. I mean, he's a fairly young guy, so it's a little bit strange writing a biography about somebody so young. But I mean, you've read it, you see, it's really just about that story of, I mean, he starts as this boy with a dream, and things go sideways, and he's got to work through a lot of stuff. And I mean, now he ends up where he is now. But it's just a great story of basically just somebody growing up.
So you're from Greenville, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Greenville is, for those of you that don't know, where East Carolina is located and where Riley got his first permanent offensive coordinator job. And that's a story in and of itself. But one of the things that I've always been fascinated by is how he was treated in Greenville. And it feels like he was a little
Yeah.
bit closer to the community than he will ever have a chance to be in a place like Norman, where football is not just a way of life, it is big business.
Yeah, he was, man. People loved him here. Him and Ruffin. I mean, people still love Ruffin McNeil here, who was the coach of East Carolina when Lincoln was here. But yeah, I mean, people loved him here. I mean, it was just he and Ruffin did something for Greenville and for East Carolina football that's never been done before. And that I mean, they just people just had an absolute blast with, that team being here those 5 years. I mean, I was actually a grad student at ECU when they were here for a couple of those years, and I was at a bunch of those games. I mean, it was just, having grown up in Greenville, I mean, it's this kind of sleepy small town. I mean, it was just people just, they always kind of lived for pirate football around here. But those few years with Lincoln and Ruffin here, that was something special.
So when did you graduate grad school?
Oh, man, when was that? I think 2012.
Okay, so how old are you now?
Yeah, 33.
We're the same age. We graduated grad school the same year.
Oh, man.
No,
Too
seriously.
weird.
Yeah,
Too weird.
I was at OU, right? And no,
Right.
that's wild. Okay, so
That is wild.
you also have an appreciation for what he's been doing in the way that I do because he's 4 years older than
Right.
us on September
Right.
5th. And I wanted to
Yep.
ask in this journey as you're trying to report this book, what fact or story that you discovered surprised you most? Because the thing about writing about sports is so much of these guys is already known. There's already so much there that it's difficult to turn over stones, but you managed to get to a few, and I wanted to know what you thought they were.
Man, yeah, that's a great question. Man, off the top of my head, what just the first thing that comes to my mind is him as, a high school quarterback. I mean, I didn't, you figure if he's this good of a coach and he played, I mean, he was pretty good, but he was really the man there in that little town. And I mean, it's really like he really had a chance to be somebody as a quarterback before he hurt his arm. He might have been undersized as an NFL quarterback, but I mean, he was good. And so it was really cool to learn about his high school career and how that went. I mean, he still, even after hurting his shoulder as badly as he did, he still led them to some, then at the time historic success for their. I mean, it was this tiny town of a team, and they still did pretty well with him. But then, I mean, kind of following up on that, like when he was starting out as a coach at Texas Tech, he still was working with that team and the coach of his high school team, and ended up, I mean, more or less helping lead them to their first state championship by helping the coach kind of overhaul their high school offense and do some different things there. And that was really cool to me, that like he was doing all that even, way back then.
So one of the things that I also found to be remarkable about Riley in this story is how many things had to go together and had to go together for a guy just like him, because there's the luck involved, but there's also what we're getting at and what he won't actually admit to, which is if you put him in front of an IQ test, he probably tests as a genius. And his memory is the stuff of legend, especially around here, because they have a parlor game where on his coach's show, one of the analysts will ask him what play was run on a down and distance and whatnot. You seen this? Have you heard this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yep.
To this day, he's not been stumped, right?
Yep.
And you have these great stories in here about some like teachers that thought he was cheating, and coaches that thought he would be a scientist for NASA, and someone thought he would cure cancer, and he's going, I don't know about that, but to listen to him, right, and to hear him speak about things is to believe that he just chose football as opposed to anything else.
Yeah, that's and he has that story in there that he tells about how well basketball plays, because he played basketball. He's a good basketball player. Well, he struggled with like basketball plays and stuff, and like, really, I don't know. Like it's he talks about how football just kind of like it really like made him come alive and making his mind come alive. But I mean, either way, he's clearly a brilliant guy. And Tyler, that photographic memory, that's something that you see and hear a lot about with like the best of the best, especially in sports. I mean, LeBron James can do the same thing, if you ask him about plays and things like that. And that's just, I mean, it's a gift that you can't train that. You're either born with that or you don't have it. You can't train a brain to do that and just remember things that vividly. Some of us have better memories than others, but it's really rare to have that powerful of a memory to where you can remember things that clearly, that well, that far after the fact. And so, I mean, he's clearly got a different mind than most of us.
Pat Mahomes is also that way, and I keep a running tab of these guys that I believe have photographic memories, and they're, as you just said, inevitably at the top of the sport. Like LeBron will do this thing where in a post-game presser, he will write your column for you if he feels inclined to, right? And I've always thought that was one of the most remarkable things.
No, yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's just, you can't train it. Like, you just have it or you don't. These guys have it, and yeah, I mean, it blows my mind every time. It's unreal.
So what kind of access did you have to him after your initial reporting for Bleacher Report?
I didn't have any for the book, really. We had a conversation about the book at the beginning of 2019 when I told him that, I was working on it. And what he told me in that conversation was, he was on the fence about whether he wanted to participate in it, whether Oklahoma wanted to be involved, because I have a note about it in the back of the book. Like he felt too young. He felt like it would be kind of strange. It might come off as kind of weird for him to be participating in a book project being so young, and he just didn't want to give people the wrong idea. And he did eventually decide not to participate in the book, and Oklahoma, of course, went along with that, which is all fine and good. I got no hard feelings on that. I understand. I mean, obviously, it would have been fantastic to spend time with him and learn more directly from him. But yeah, so I didn't have direct access with him, really, Oklahoma, for the book itself. I did speak with a lot of people that were close to him and close to the program, and some of them on the record, a lot of them off the record, because they wanted to respect Lincoln's wishes. And, of course, again, no hard feelings on that. But yeah, still, I went to West Texas. Like, I drove up and down the length of it to see like the kind of drives he made, especially when he was like wrestling with whether or not to become a coach and give up football in college. I mean, there's this long 6-7 hour drive from Lubbock to Horseshoe Bay that he like molded over. And so I did that drive and talked to a bunch of people in his hometown, spent about a week in Muleshoe in Lubbock. Just talked to a bunch of people around there and spent a good amount of time in Norman too, just talking to people around town and that kind of thing. And so no direct access to Lincoln, but I still spent a lot of time in the area, just trying to make sure I had a feel for what his life was like.
Well, I'm pissed because I wanted to hear what the hell Mike Stoops was thinking the whole time, and I wanted to know what other assistants thought. I mean, like that's selfish of me, I understand, but like Bill Beadenbow, Dennis Simmons, Cale Gundy, all those guys, I'm sure that if they talked to you, great. If they would have gone on the record, that would have made me happy because that makes the story better, and I'm on the side of the storyteller in this, as you can very well tell and pay attention to. But now, knowing that, right, and knowing the kind of legwork that you had to do to put into try to get something like a full portrait of him, I was impressed with one fact in particular that you took pains to stretch out, which is the role that Donnie Duncan played in his life. Because there's all these stories about how Riley got to Oklahoma and what his stories were. And I want to get to Mike Leach and that conversation, but I did want to touch on Donnie there because Donnie Duncan had a career unlike anybody else in college football ever. And we give Gil Brandt a lot of credit for what apparently Donnie Duncan was doing the whole time. So in learning about that, especially, I believe, posthumously, not having any access at all to Duncan or his family, how did you come to that thread and how did you pull it?
Started with, conversation I had with Lincoln back in 2017 when I was writing that story for Bleacher Report. He just mentioned it in passing, and now that when I started working on the book, I wished I'd followed up on it more. But it was just something to mention that didn't end up playing a huge part in that story because it could only do so much with the story, which is part of why I wanted to do the book too. I love the way books can connect so many dots and pull out these threads and connect things that you just really don't see. And like even the magazine stories and everything's gonna be great. You're right. Like a book can connect so many different things. And so with Donnie, it was just, I just did a lot. There's a lot of articles where he showed up. So I was able to piece stuff together through that. So I feel a huge debt of gratitude to so many other journalists that have been covering the team and Lincoln, the people around him for years. I just got thousands of old newspaper articles and stuff saved away on my computer now. And then, just talking with guys like me. I spent a lot of time on the phone with Mike Leach. I talked with Ruffin McNeil, a pretty decent vet, earlier this year. And just other people, close to the program, just asking them about him because, it became clear Donnie was this just enormous influence on Lincoln and really just kind of made her. It wasn't Donnie solely, but Donnie had a lot to do with Lincoln ended up where he is now.
Yeah, and the way that all of these dots connect, because we can draw straight lines back to Leach, but also, Riley being in the box with Dana Holgerson as Dana is relaying to Leach what he sees and he's charting plays. Earlier in the 2019 season, you'll know that Dana Holgerson and Lincoln Riley played against each other, Houston and OU, and it was a little bit, let's say, it's not contentious, I would say, but it was definitely some gamesmanship because Riley didn't actually put out a depth chart. He just put googly eyes, and then Dana claimed to know what he was doing, and I felt that was a good part of this, in which you also have this real friction, I believe, in that Dana Holgerson and Sonny Dykes are assistants on that tech squad, and Riley and his bad shoulder, for which you draw a straight thread through, right? That shoulder, I want you to tell that story. But what I found most interesting is Dykes and Holgerson had gone to Leach and said, stop letting this kid play quarterback. Our receivers hate it. They're not getting the ball. And then you got Leach saying, hey, you can't play quarterback anymore, but I got this position for you as, my gopher and my personal secretary. And yet I got to believe that, Lincoln holds on to that because you also draw out when he's angry, right? And usually when he's angry, it's not necessarily to his benefit. So, yes, in the way that you were able to connect all these things together, and for me, who's somewhat encyclopedic about Lincoln Riley and OU football, I was appreciative of that. So I want to start with the question of Leach and hiring a 23-year-old as your inside receivers coach.
Well, that's Mike Leach for you, right? Like he does what he wants to do when he wants to do it, and logic be darned, like he's going to do it. Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about that. I mean, it was funny. The thing that comes to mind is, I mean, I remember him saying, and it's even in the book, I'm pretty sure, is like, well, if it ends up not working out, I can always just fire him. It's kind of where he was at. But no, I mean, I mean, he just saw it in him. I mean, Leach was a guy he was pretty experienced by that point. I mean, I think, coaches, especially like, coaches that think a little bit differently, they can recognize another one of their own pretty quickly. I mean, especially when the kids, I mean, Lincoln was 19 when Leach first convinced him to try out as a coach. And, it's just, and then he worked. I mean, Lincoln just worked his tail off, and really, I mean, he wasn't just content to do whatever Leach told him to do. Like, he brought his own ideas to the table. His imagination was just always firing, and he was learning how to convey that. I mean, he was pretty quiet the first couple years or so as he kind of took everything in, but just as he got more confident and everything else, like, he just started speaking up. And I mean, I think Leach just recognized, I mean, there's something special about him as a coach, and wanted to do his part to help him out.
The evolution that Riley underwent as a play caller and coordinator, I thought was interesting in that he had that good year to start at ECU, and then the second year wasn't so good, but he's also trying to tinker with what they do because we're also talking about an air raid coach, right? And there's this idea,
Right.
especially a decade ago, in which the air raid can score you a lot of points, can't win you games that you need to win, it can't win you championships. And then you get these other concepts that come in where Riley does what I believe every coach should do, which is, okay, what do my players do well? What do they like to run? Who are they in particular? And one of the things that you point to, because stats can be misleading, but you got a tailback that was pretty doggone good over there. And one of the first things that Brent's brought up at Oklahoma is, hey, you're bringing an air raid, dude. We got Secretariat and War Emblem in the backfield, and we want to run them,
Right.
right? And yet
Right.
he had allowed himself to do that. Were you able to get at what it actually took? I mean, it might just be losing for him to try to work in some really intense run schemes into those air raid concepts in the pass game.
I think it just kind of comes down to what he learned to get really good at, especially at East Carolina when they were struggling, and then like his second year in particular there, he learned that, you know, you got to be flexible. You got to be willing to evolve and adapt. I mean, not just over, the course of a career, but I mean, from season to season, even, especially if you're trying to do something different, like an air raid offense back then. I mean, now it's more common, but back then, it was still, I mean, it was fun, but you're right. Like, people didn't know if it would win. And so that's the one thing I think he's good at a lot of stuff. But one of the most important things that I think he's good at is he's always willing to change. He's always willing to evolve and adapt more than I think most other coaches probably are. And I mean, even the best ones are always willing to, but it's just something that came up a lot with everybody I talked to, whether it's Mike Leach and Ruff McNeil in particular come to mind. They just talked about how willing he is to learn and grow and evolve and just keep developing new ways to do what he does better, instead of he's very much like, it's not, hey, here's what I think will work, do it and it'll work, or you're wrong. He's constantly looking at, all right, here's what I think will work. Let's try it. I think it'll work. And then if it doesn't, he's not too proud to change. And I think that's a big part of his success.
Could you tell the story about how Riley hurt his shoulder and probably changed his fortunes forever? Because one of the things that occurred to me as you were trotting that story out is I've never actually seen Lincoln Riley throw a football. Which, like, you can't not see Jim Harbaugh throwing a football, right? Like, coaches just do it in warm-ups. They do it at practice. Yeah. And yet you made perfect sense for me when you drew this story out.
Yeah, so he was, I believe he was a sophomore in high school. I mean, he was competing to be the starting quarterback on the varsity team even as a sophomore. So, I mean, he's young, he's hungry, all that. And, it's just they're having a scrimmage one day, and it's towards the end of the game, and coach puts in, a senior they want to get a touchdown for. And so draw the play, throws it to the guy, hits him right in the numbers. The guy blows it, and ball bounces up in the air. A linebacker catches it, takes off down the field. Lincoln's ticked off, and that'd be 15 years old and wanting to be the man. And so he takes off after the guy instead of just kind of letting him go. I mean, this is a scrimmage. It's not state championship, but he takes off after the guy, and he gets him, but he hits him hard as he can, with that throwing shoulder first, and stops him from scoring and all that. But then when it comes time to get up, he can't feel his shoulder, and turns out his shoulder is pretty badly dislocated, and doctor tells him it's going to need surgery and all that. And I mean, this is one of the craziest parts of it to me too. Instead of just getting the surgery, like he goes full West Texas football with it, right? Which is, we'll do the surgery after the season because I still got to play and help the team somehow. So they get this this shoulder brace that kind of it straps his arm to his side, and he plays as like a defensive end all season that way. And then he gets his shoulder taken care of after the season. But yeah, like he just, he had this really, I mean, he knew how to throw a football. I mean, he wanted to be a pro football player. And I mean, knowing how smart he is and how hard he works, I mean, he was figuring that out. I mean, he knew how to play quarterback, he knew how to throw the ball. And after that injury, he had this sharp over the top delivery before and afterwards. He just couldn't get his arm up. He couldn't throw it. So he was just kind of sidearming the ball a lot, just kind of flipping it out. And there are some old high school, there's some footage of some of his old high school games that I found, and like I mean, he could still let it go a little bit even after the fact. I mean, it's kind of remarkable, but it just wasn't something that was going to work for college. It was a college football quarterback and beyond. So yeah, that moment just really resonated with me. And like you said, it's throughout the book because it's also just a picture of what it takes to kind of grow and be successful. I mean, stuff's going to happen, stuff's going to go wrong. You're even going to get mad about it, but you can't be stupid about it. You can't do something that's going to hurt you. And that's what he had to learn kind of repeatedly throughout his career. And that's just something that became the theme is, don't do stuff that's going to hurt you. And that was just kind of the perfect picture of it.
That was one of the stories that I liked. The other one was Coach Switzer calling Bob, asking him why the hell you're having a 5 a.m.
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah.
And do you want to fill the folks in on that story?
Yeah, it was basically Lincoln first gets to Oklahoma, and Barry Switzer wants to take him to dinner one night, and they're out, and they're getting into a bottle of wine, and Lincoln's starting to feel pretty good, and they're feeling good, but Lincoln's like, it's getting late, I can't be staying out too long, drinking too much. Got my first official team deal first thing in the morning, 5:00. And so Barry Switzer pulls out his cell phone and calls Bob Stoops and gives him hell for having a team workout at 5 a.m. while he's trying to entertain this hot new coach they just brought in. So yeah, that was just the way it went with them. And yeah, I mean, it kind of speaks to, I think, the culture there. I mean, it seems like they're obviously very professional and they want to do well, but they're not afraid to let themselves just have a good time too on the way.
That's Coach Switzer, man. That's just the king. That man could still run for governor today and win in a landslide. I mean, this is his state as much as anything else. But it also speaks to Switzer wanting to do that for Riley, which gets to this question that I had for you, because we're talking about the triumvirate of David Boren, Joe Constiglione, Bob Stoops, convincing Lincoln that they're going to take care of him. Don't take that Houston job that's available. And then, a few months down the line, oh yeah, now you're the head coach at 33, right? We told you this. Yeah. And then it's been a charmed experience all the way up through where we are today during this pandemic. And yet I thought what Urban Meyer and Mike Leach had to say in the epilogue was perhaps for me the most insightful part of the book, which is, what's he going to do when the bottom falls out? And what is your sense of what that might look like for him, just in your reporting and how people have spoken to him?
That's a good question. And, I'm always hesitate to talk about what somebody might do before it's happened and all that. But it's, I don't see any reason why he wouldn't handle it as well as he can. I mean, he doesn't seem like the type of guy who's going to, freak out and some kind of meltdown or any of that. I think he's kind of learned his lesson both from his own experiences and from watching. I think more importantly, watching other people. I think that's something he's good at, is learning from other people's mistakes too. And so, stuff's going to go bad at some point. Like, you said, the pandemic, and he's handled it about as well as, if not better than, just about every other college football coach from what I've been following. The OU football team went a long time without even a single positive COVID test. And I just think, I think he's a smart guy both on and off the field. A lot of coaches are brilliant as football coaches, but they might not quite be as brilliant when it comes to the off the field stuff. And it seems like Lincoln, he thinks it all the way through. I mean, that's the way he said he handled the COVID stuff was, he listened to the medical professionals and took their advice. I mean, they're wearing masks out there on the field while they're practicing, which can't be comfortable, but I mean, it's, he's all about trying to do the right thing. Kind of comes back to that shoulder story in a way, right? Like, don't do stuff that's going to hurt you. And it seems like that's the approach he takes with everything. So, if and when the bottom does fall out, I think that he'll be able to turn it around pretty quick as long as he keeps doing what he's doing.
Yeah, man. 36-6 as a head coach, 3 straight college football playoffs appearances. We'll continue to watch. Maybe you know what? He's decent. He's decent. How about that?
He's decent.
He's
He's
decent.
pretty decent.
But
He's decent.
Brandon Sneed is great, and so is his biography of Lincoln Riley. It's called Sooner: The Making of a Football Coach. Lincoln Riley's rise from West Texas to the University of Oklahoma. Brandon was nice enough to sign my copy, and it was an enjoyable read. Brandon, thanks so much for this, man.
Yeah, no, thank you, RJ. It's been great talking with you about it, and just hope people have have a little time to check it out. It's things are just I mean, at the end of the day, it's a biography and all that. It's just a fun read. It's a great story. I think it's just something that can inspire some people, and maybe even help some people out. Just seeing the way he's dealt with some of the harder things in his life, and the way he helps his players now. I mean, it's just I learned a lot from it, and I had a great time writing it, and I'm really excited for people to get their hands on it, and I think they'll have a great time with it too.